Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it, placed it among the reeds by the riverbank, and his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." The word of the Lord. Exodus chapter 2. It's been a long time since God promised Abraham that after 400 years, after the iniquity of the Amalekites is full, your people will come back. It's been a while. It's been a while since Joseph was second in command in Egypt. And when the Pharaoh there liked him some. Somewhere along in there, I like the story that says at some point the Egyptians got their world back, and then they didn't like the Hebrews. And so a Pharaoh arises that doesn't know Joseph. And all the people are put into slavery. It's not a very good picture. They work hard. They don't get much for it. Now they'll remember it differently in the wilderness, but it's not good. They cry out. Have you ever known people that no matter where they were, they wanted to be somewhere else? Like you, now. Think of it. No one's coming for you. And so we get to talk about this passage in Exodus 2. When I was preaching in Abilene, I had two particular people in the audience. One was James Thompson, and he knew everything in the New Testament. And I had Mark Hamilton, and he knew everything in the Old Testament. I had this on reliable sources. And so the only time I was uncomfortable when I was preaching is when I was using either the New or the Old Testament. Well, Dr. Shipp's here today, and so I'm familiar with some of these feelings that I have. But I know this story because this is the story you learn in Bible class. This is the story that is inspired by the Holy Spirit through flannel graph. This is the story that lets you build a little basket. Sometimes you weave it out of paper. Sometimes you have a teacher that actually has little strips of wood. It's amazing. It's the one where you hear that they used pitch and to make it watertight, and you remember that you made something like the same boat when you made the ark. And maybe there's something that you're supposed to remember that connects the deliverance in the ark and the deliverance of the small boat. And the time when you had 8 people and animals called by the twos, and sometimes when just one child in a boat by himself is enough to make for deliverance. You heard these stories. And so you learned it, and you were told the story about how this Moses guy was raised, and he became like an Egyptian, and he was smart with all the things that Egyptians knew. And somebody would try to tell you, some little lady with her hair in a bun so tight that her eyes wouldn't close, would tell you that at that point the Egyptians were the smartest people in the world. And Moses was there among them. I don't know what the predictable story would have been there, that Moses would have gotten power and rank. He would have been able to slip his family special rations. He would have been able to bless people kind of on the sly. He would have been able to do that being on the inside, being the Israelite on the inside of the government. But the story is, and when you read Acts chapter 7, Stephen's account, Stephen is very sure that Moses did not care anything to be Pharaoh's daughter's son. And the Hebrews writer in Hebrews 11 says that he did not care anything about the pleasures of sin for a season. Boy, there's a phrase that's been used a lot, but he took on the love of God and went out and claimed his right to be an Israelite man. And so you have this story that grows out of that makes him this well, I love it in the English Standard Version. Later on, when he's in the wilderness and the shepherds are beating up on Midian's on Jethro's daughters, rule. It says Moses stood up. He's one of those guys. He's a stand-up guy. He's a stand-up guy. He sees an Egyptian beating up on an Israelite and chooses, perhaps he had done it before, but chooses at this moment to distinguish himself from the Egyptians and to step out as the defender of the Israelites. And he kills a man. He stands up. He kills a man, defending him. Do any of you have that urge? That defender urge? Some of us are watchers. I have a son. He's bigger than I am. Came home from high school one time. He'd been to a movie, and he had this mark between his eyes. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, there was this guy that was mistreating his girlfriend, and when he started mistreating his girlfriend, my arm just went out." And her boyfriend didn't like it. And I've been with my son when some parent is wailing away on their kid in the parking lot at Walmart, and my son just says, "That's right, sir, big guy, beat on the little kid. Just go ahead. He needs it. You know he does. What a big man you are." I got a son like that. Moses was a guy like that. Appears to be the guy that he was drawn out of water, but he's dry now. And he's strong now. And he can kill a man with his bare hands. And bury him someplace quiet, hidden. The next day, or the day after that, or shortly after that, he sees two Israelites who are grumping at each other, and evidently it's coming to fisticuffs, and he says, "You guys are brothers. Well, you don't need to do this." And the guy says, "That secret killing you think you did?" You know, all of us imagine somebody who needs killing, and we do it and save the world. That secret killing that you did, we know about that. And are you going to kill me now? Is that what you're going to do, big guy? You standing up again? And he knows he's going to be found out, and he is, and he runs. And the up-and-coming guy in the palace is now nobody in the desert. Nobody in the desert. And he goes out there, and with Pharaoh trying to kill him, he goes to Midian. And the priest of Midian has 7 daughters. Jeff will be talking to people later on about the priest of Midian and how the worship of God in some way developed in the desert. He volunteered before. He's got some Greek passage, I think. And they came into trouble, the girls did, and Moses stands up and saves them and waters their flock, and they come home to their father Reuel, not Lemon's Reuel. How is it that you come home so soon today? An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. Where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah, and she gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And eventually the king of Egypt died, and the people groaned because of their slavery. And the cry for rescue from slavery came to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Moses is in the middle of nowhere, hanging out with this priest who we don't know very much about, but he does like to divide people in groups for efficiency. And this is the life of Moses now. It's not that he's going anywhere from here. He's not. He's in the desert, and he is going to die in this desert, in some nameless place that'll be sand and sand. He is no one now. Have you seen those graves in the little communities on the little hills out in the country where the stones are all askew and no one remembers anybody there? That's who he is. Now, there are people who, there are two kinds of people. There are people who think Moses wrote Psalms 90 and people who don't. It's the only two kind of people there are in the world. But if he wrote it, and it's okay today that he did, at least for the next 10 minutes, you get the feeling that he wrote it perhaps in this desert. Perhaps. Because he talks about how time doesn't have much meaning. For 1,000 years in your sight are as but yesterday when it's past, or like a watch in the night. And he says, the years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. If those are his words, or if they represent at least the words of his time, by the time he comes to the desert at 40 and spends his 40 years going through the annual cycles of the flocks dropping their young and raising them, of the way the seasons move and the water comes and goes, by the time he does that next 40 years, his life is done. So when you're talking about this to folks, maybe you have to say to them, maybe you've got a story. Maybe you've got a story too. Maybe you didn't grow up in a normal home. Maybe you're somebody that was sort of put in the basket and left out to see if anybody would want you. Maybe you weren't adopted by royalty and sent home to be nursed by your mama. Maybe your story is something else. Maybe you wish you had been adopted out. Maybe you would have been safer adopted out. Maybe you'd been safer. Maybe when you were in high school or junior high, you wished you could have gotten on a small boat and gone anywhere else. Maybe so. And maybe in those moments when you were a long way from feeling connected to anything, you wondered if God was anywhere around, and if He knew your name, and if He had anything that He would do with you in your life. Maybe you wondered. Maybe you've done some stupid things. Maybe that felt pretty righteous and manly or womanly in your life. Maybe you've done some stupid things. Maybe in the fit of a moment of righteousness you have, well, maybe nobody in here has killed somebody, but you never know. Maybe you ran that red light. Maybe you were drunk that night. Maybe you were with that person you shouldn't have been with. Maybe there's a story embedded in you that you wish were a story covered in sand and not known by anyone, even yourself. If only. And you wonder, what does a person with a story like that mean to God anymore? What does it mean? Does God need the people that come out of the good homes and the good Christian homes? We always talk about you need a Christian home, and like God could only use somebody that came from one. God can only use people who haven't come through a 12-step program to anywhere. Then maybe your life has taken you not to anywhere. Remember when you thought you would play for the Cubs or the Cowboys? Remember when you thought you were going to be somebody? That everybody would know your name? Someday I'll be somebody. You'd been studying people that have been somebody, and you get to thinking when you study history that you're going to be somebody who goes down in history too. But most people don't go down in history. They just go down. They just go down. And I guess what we would know is this. If Moses had come from a slightly altered home life, and if he had had a story in which he'd killed a man and hid him and been found out and had to run for his life into the desert, and if he had lived honorably in the desert the rest of his life and died there in that sand before God following him, he'd had a great life. You don't have to be somebody to be somebody for God. You don't have to be somebody to be somebody God knows and remembers and loves. You don't have to be somebody. And here, as Moses is at the end of what he thinks is his life, he is just about to begin the great adventure. We must always imagine that we may be about to be on the great adventure. We may know everything about our past and where God has touched us and where He's taken us, everything we know. But we do not know where God may take us today. We may not know. And so we live in a kind of expectation that no matter what our origins are, God is at work doing wonders for the good of His people. And no matter what our mistakes are, God is at work in all things for the sake of those who love Him. And even when we think our life is at its dead end, God is at work in all things. So we should go forward because God does unexpected things. May God bless us.